and you had dinner at a place called Yardbird, right?
That's right.
Are you aware that that happened on March 11th, 2014?
No, I don't remember the date, just that it was during the spring break.
Fair enough. You remember sitting outside on the patio?
I do.
And it was you and Mr. Lacoste and Charlie and a woman named Catherine Magbanawa. Do you recall that?
That's right.
Who was Charlie's girlfriend at the time.
Yes.
Are you aware that Sigfredo Garcia was watching you at that dinner?
No.
Are you aware that he was contemplating running your brother over with his car at that dinner?
No.
After dinner, you and Jeff Lacoste stayed at Charlie's house, right?
We did.
Miss Magbanawa wasn't there, right?
I don't remember her being there.
It was just the three of you.
I think so.
And you left the next morning.
We did.
Now, you and Mr. Lacoste started having issues around May of 2014. Is that fair to say?
That sounds about right.
You started to become nervous around him?
I don't really remember if I was nervous around him, but I started thinking it wasn't the right relationship.
He started accusing you of being unfaithful, right?
He did.
He accused you of having an affair with someone that you had previously dated?
He did.
Excuse me. You told him that you didn't. You denied it.
That's right.
And he didn't believe you.
He did not.
And before this individual that you used to date, you had coffee with at a place called All Saints in Tallahassee, right?
I did.
And Mr. Lacoste saw you having coffee with this individual, right?
He did.
And that caused a confrontation. Is that fair to say?
He flew into a rage.
Subsequently, he went through your phone and planner, right?
He did.
And this is around May, June of 2014.
That sounds right.
And you and Mr. Lacoste went to Gainesville for a weekend for his work at some point around this time frame.
Yes.
And that Saturday night, June 28th, he basically exploded at you.
He did.
He yelled at you for hours.
He did.
He accused you of having affairs with multiple people.
He did.
You were very upset, to say the least.
I was devastated. Yep.
Now, you were scheduled to leave for South Florida, I believe it was on June 30th or June 29th to celebrate your dad's 70th birthday, right?
That sounds right.
And Mr. Lacoste wasn't invited.
No.
You went down to South Florida on June 30th, and you and the boys stayed with your parents, right?
We did.
You had the boys with you the whole time.
Yes.
Dan Markel didn't have the boys at that point in time. The boys were with you.
Yes.
And Charlie knew that, right?
Yes, he was with us.
Your mom planned a big party for the birthday.
She did.
Now, I think when Miss Kappelman asked you if the birthday fell on a Saturday, you weren't sure.
I remembered it being on his actual birthday, which I thought was a Saturday, but I don't remember the calendar from 2014.
May I approach Your Honor with Defendant's Exhibit 25? Ms. Adelson, does this refresh your recollection that July 5th, 2014 was on a Saturday?
Yes.
And that the party was at 7:30 p.m. or
Yes.
thereabouts?
Mm-hmm.
Put that aside. Now, when you got back to Tallahassee, you saw Mr. Lacoste on July 13th.
That sounds right.
And when you saw him, It was not a good meeting. Is that fair to say? It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You saw him the next day at a yoga studio,
I went to yoga and he wanted to come.
and it was awkward
It was.
and kind of tense.
It was.
And he asked to see you again later that week,
He did.
and you didn't want to.
I did not.
And when you got home that night, you sent him an email asking him not to contact you for at least 7 days, that you wanted to think things over. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You never saw him again, right?
No?
Are you now aware that there was a first attempt on your ex-husband's life on June 4th and June 4th, 5th of 2014?
Yes.
When you lived with Professor Markel on Trescott, was your address publicly listed?
I believe so.
Can I have one moment, Your Honor? Judge, at this point in time, we'd ask a stipulation be read into evidence.
Which stipulation?
The stipulation regarding the drop-off pickup schedule for the Markel children.
Very well.
Do you need a copy, Your Honor?
I have it right here. I'm just bringing up instruction 2.3. Members of the jury, when the parties agree that certain facts are true, that is called a stipulation of fact. You must accept stipulated facts as having been proven. However, the significance of these facts, as with all facts, is for you to decide. In this case, the stipulated facts that you must accept are true are: the Markel children were enrolled at Creative Preschool located in Tallahassee. During the week of July 14th, 2024, their drop-off pickup schedule was as follows. Monday, July 14th, 2024, dropped off at 8:55 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 5 p.m. by Dan Markel. Tuesday, July 15th, 2014, dropped off at 8:25 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 4:50 p.m. by Dan Markel. Wednesday, July 16th, 2014, dropped off at 9 a.m. by Dan Markel, picked up at 4:30 p.m. by Wendi Adelson. Thursday, July 17th, 2014, dropped off at 8:30 a.m. by Wendi Adelson, picked up at 4:45 p.m. by Dan Markel. Friday, July 18th, 2014, dropped off at 8:50 a.m. by Dan Markel.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I want to first focus your attention on the July 17, 2014 schedule. On July 17, 2014, as Your Honor just recited, do you recall dropping the kids off at school at 8:30 in the morning?
Yes.
And Professor Markel picked them up at 4:45 p.m. on that day, thereabouts.
Which I just heard, but I wouldn't have known what time.
You didn't pick them up that
I
day.
did. No, it wasn't my day.
So it would be impossible, the person would be wrong if they said that they saw you and the kids by Professor Markel's house in the afternoon or morning of July 17, 2014, correct?
It would be some other woman and some other kids.
You spoke to your mom probably close to daily, right?
Yeah,
During this time period. She would know when you had the kids and didn't have the kids, right?
probably.
Now, I want to go back to something briefly that we talked about yesterday before we stopped. You knew that Professor Markel posted his travel plans on Facebook and on his profs blog, right?
Yes,
He would talk about places and conferences that he was speaking at, right?
he would.
Are you aware that on the weekend of the 20th, he was supposed to speak at a conference in New Jersey, and he posted it on Prof's blog as well as on Facebook?
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Best Buy. May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
I'm showing you what's marked for identification purposes only as Defense Exhibit 29 and 30. Looking at Defense Exhibit 29, does that refresh your recollection that the warranty was under your father's name for
Yes.
that TV?
Mm-hmm.
A warranty with the Geek Squad?
Yes.
Now, before you look at Exhibit 20, do you recall that your mother scheduled the appointment for the TV to be fixed with this Geek Squad?
I remembered that I scheduled it, but it looks like she scheduled it and gave me the number to call in case I needed to reschedule it.
And in fact, she emailed you on July 11th and told you if you can't keep the appointment on the 18th, call this number to reschedule it, right?
Yes.
You can put that aside. I want to talk a little bit more about July 18th. Do you recall leaving your house that day on Aqua Ridge Ray around 12:30 in the afternoon?
I do.
And you were going to meet a friend for lunch at a place called Mosaic.
Yes.
But you had to pick up a bottle of, I don't know if it's bourbon or whiskey. I don't even know if they're the same things, but Bullet whiskey.
It was bourbon.
Okay. It was for your friend's wedding shower that night.
They were having us stock the bar party, so they asked for specific kinds of alcohol to stock the bar.
And I'm showing you what's marked as Defense Exhibit 32. Is this the invitation that you received?
Yes, that's it.
Judge, I would move Defense Exhibit 32 into evidence at this point in time.
Any objection?
Hearsay, Your Honor.
Exception?
State of mind.
You can provide me with the exhibit.
I'm going to show right-hand corner. I'm going to show the right-hand corner of this.
The objection is sustained. She may testify as to remember.
Do you recall on the left-hand corner of the invitation, it says, help the bride and groom stock the bar for their wedding and bring a bottle of Bullet bourbon? Do you recall that?
Yes.
You can put that aside. Now, you decided to go to ABC Liquors on Bedden Road to look for the bourbon, right?
I did.
Okay. You're not a big drinker, is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
You went to that store because you were familiar with it?
I'd seen it close to my house, so
Close to your old house?
close to my old house.
There could have been liquor stores that were closer to your current house?
Sure.
Now, when you drove to ABC Liquor, you tried to go through Trescott. Is
I
that
did.
fair to say?
It was blocked.
There are other ways to go to ABC Liquor, right? You could have gone down other roads.
I don't have the best sense of direction, so when I find a route, I just kind of keep using that route. I don't look for something else.
Okay. You got to Mosaic at around 1 p.m.
That sounds right.
and your lunch was interrupted by Investigator Isom, who told you that something had happened.
That's right.
You went with him voluntarily to
I
speak
did.
with him? You let police search your car?
Yes.
You were interviewed with the investigator from approximately 2:45 p.m. until 7:50 p.m.?
Yes.
He told you that your ex-husband had been shot and was unlikely to survive, right?
Yes.
You were in shock.
Yes.
You were pretty open with police, telling them a lot of things, right?
They kept telling me they needed my help, and so I kept trying to help.
Now, you remember on direct, Ms. Kappelman asked you about this interview.
Yes.
And she asked you about all the people you mentioned during the interview, including Charlie.
Yes.
And you said I was just wheeling off names, right?
Yes.
In fact, isn't the first person in the interview that you mentioned was yourself?
Yes.
You said that you would understand if you were viewed as the prime suspect, right?
Yes.
Before you mentioned anyone else, you mentioned yourself.
Yes,
You told them about the motion to relocate.
I did.
You told them about the fight you had with Professor Markel that very morning about some swimming for the boys.
Yes.
You were spitting out a lot of ideas.
I was.
And you agreed to let the police search your phone.
Yes.
You agreed to let the police search your car.
Yes.
That's where they found that picture that I wasn't able to admit of the invitation of the bowl of bourbon, right?
Yeah.
You agreed to be fingerprinted.
Yes.
You agreed to be checked for gunshot residue.
Yes.
You gave them your computer to be searched.
I did.
Towards the end of your interview, you asked the police officer if you could call your parents, right?
I did.
And the police allowed you to do that.
Yes.
And you called your mother's cell phone sometime around 7:04 p.m.
Yes.
And you spoke to your mom. I don't know if you remember, but do you remember your dad being in the shower because they were going out to dinner?
I don't remember.
Your mom didn't answer actually the first call, and you called back a couple minutes later and she answered. Do you recall that?
I don't.
And when you called your mom, she was surprised.
Yes.
And you asked her to call Charlie and tell him what happened, right?
Yes.
You didn't speak with Charlie that day, right?
I don't think so.
On July 19th, the next day, you spoke to Charlie at 10:50 in the morning. Is that, you won't know the exact time, but do you recall speaking with him in the morning?
I honestly don't.
Do you recall letting him know that Professor Markel had passed away in the early morning?
I don't remember the conversation.
When your parents came directly to Tallahassee, correct?
They did.
They stopped in Orlando and they got there on the morning of the 19th, right?
Yes.
And when they got there, they were scared and frantic, right?
Yes.
Your dad didn't sleep. He couldn't get police protection, so he planted his chair in the front of your window to make sure that no one was going to come to your house and shoot it up, right?
Correct.
Now, you all attended a memorial service on the 20th, right?
Yes.
And you arranged for the Markels to see the boys after the memorial service, right?
They all came over my house.
And you left Tallahassee, correct?
Not on the 20th. No.
On the 21st.
Yes.
And when you left Tallahassee on the 21st, did you bring all your belongings?
I brought some swimsuits for the boys and some pajamas, and I thought we'd be back in a day or two.
And when you left, you were not yourself.
I was a mess.
You got to South Florida and you realized that you could not take care of the boys alone at this point in time.
I hadn't slept in days, and I was terrified.
To get a little more specific, you wouldn't leave the house.
No.
And you would hardly eat.
I wasn't eating, no.
And ultimately, you decided not to come back to Tallahassee.
I mean, I made that decision much later, but
And you had a friend who you grew up with, I think last name Keener, go back and get more stuff at your house, right?
He did.
You have one more moment, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Now, it's been said in this courtroom that you have tried to erase Professor Markel's memory from your boy's life. Is that true?
It's not true.
For the first 2 years after the murder, did you limit Professor Markel's family from seeing the boys?
Absolutely not.
In fact, they had complete access to the boys, right?
100%.
They made dinners with the boys.
I cooked dinner for them, yes, every time they visited.
There were sleepovers and play dates.
That's right.
There was no animosity at all, right?
No?
And then in October of 2016, things changed, right?
Yes.
A letter was released where there was a suggestion that Professor Markel's mom was talking to the state about arranging custody for the boys in case you got arrested.
Yes.
And you saw that as a betrayal.
Well, the custody was foster care, so yes.
You saw that as her thinking that you killed her son.
Yes.
And as a result of that, rightly or wrongly, you decided to limit their access.
I was afraid they were going to put my children in foster care.
Do your children know anything about their father?
They know a lot about their dad.
Do they have a picture of him in their bedroom?
Each boy has a picture of them and their dad over their bed that we say good morning to and good night to every day.
Did you benefit from Professor Markel's death?
No.
Well, you got to live in South Florida.
It's not a benefit.
How are your boys doing?
They're doing very well, thank you.
How has your job prospects been since this case hit the news?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
How are you doing?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Has this affected your life negatively or positively?
Negatively.
Does Charlie love his nephews?
Very much.